Hey everyone, it's Adrian from the Pageant Project. I have a return guest, a celebrity herself, Bailey Guy. I'll just read out her bio in case you're not familiar with her. Bailey Guy is a speaker, author, and podcast host. As the founder of GPS, which is Goals Plus Preparation Equals Success, Bailey empowers students with applicable goal setting and life skills to guide them in becoming the best versions of themselves. Inspiring ambition in all that she does, this President's Volunteer Service Award recipient shares her story of resilience and hope in both her book, Goals in Action, and her podcast, Define Success, where her mission is to pull back the curtain of what it truly means to be successful. Bailey is a recent journalism graduate of Middle Tennessee State University, where she served her campus community as a Blue Elite tour guide and the vice president of membership integrity for Alpha Omicron Pi. You can contact Bailey and learn more at baileyguyspeaks.com. Well, Bailey, how does it, welcome back. How does it feel to be famous?
Well, how does it feel for you to be famous?
Well, I'm only famous apparently because of my association with you. So you're the one that has to take credit. So how does
Oh
it
my
feel to be a
gosh.
celebrity?
That is so funny. I always grew up looking at girls on YouTube and their pageant vlogs, and I totally would not consider myself a celebrity, just for the record. But I loved just watching vlogs on YouTube, and so to now be able to produce similar content and have girls watch that and then DM me about how, that inspired them to compete at their pageant this weekend, or that they're going to this specific pageant in the summer because I did a vlog at that pageant, is it really means a lot to me to know that I have some sort of that influence and that I'm able to encourage girls to participate in this industry and get involved, because it is an industry that has totally changed my life for the better, and that I think benefits the lives of every girl that chooses to participate. So it's really funny.
Just to clarify, if you don't know what we're talking about, I that I was interviewing Bailey again, and the caption I said that a teen contestant, I didn't say that, but it's a Miss Earth USA teen contestant. I had interviewed her, and then after the interview, she said, "Oh my God, I was so nervous to interview with you because I thought you were like a celebrity because you spoken to get Bailey Guy." So I was like, I had to tell Bailey that I thought she was a celebrity. Also, just in case you forget, I did mention that today is your dear friend Victoria Vredevoogd's birthday. So just in case you get busy after this interview and you forget, would you like to take this chance to wish Victoria a birthday?
Happy birthday, bestie! I love you, Victoria, Miss Mesa America. So she'll be competing for Miss Arizona, and I'm competing for Miss Tennessee. So we're both doing our Miss America local titles right now. But I love her. We've been best friends since 2020, so 5 years now. She's actually the reason why I started my YouTube channel and started vlogging. So, which I think is where most people find my content, is through my YouTube channel. So, but shout out Victoria, she's the reason.
What made you guys connect? Obviously, you've been best friends, as you said, for like what 5 years now. It's 2025. I mean, sometimes people connect and sometimes they don't. What was it about you two that made you hit it off?
Well, so we actually competed at a pageant in 2020, and I think we both went in thinking that the other one was like obviously huge competition. I mean, Victoria was amazing. She had actually been first runner up the year before competing in that same pageant. And so I knew she was incredible. And something about it that whole week, I'm usually so not like this. I usually, love to be friends with everybody. But for some reason, something about her really intimidated me. And so we just didn't end up talking during, for most of the week. And then she ended up saying the same thing about me, that she was scared to talk to me, which is really funny that we both were just, But then on, I think it was either finals day or the day before finals, we happened to be, our hotel rooms were directly across from each other. So you open the door and there's her door. And so we would always be like leaving and entering at the same time. And so we always ran into each other, but we just like would not talk, why do we do that? I don't know. But then on either finals day or the day before, we ended up actually having a conversation. I was like, oh my gosh, she's kind of cool. And then after the pageant was over, we both ended up making top five, but neither of us won. And I was in my hotel room, and my mom, she was like, you know what you should do? You should go across the hall to Victoria's room and ask if she wants to go get ice cream with you. And I was like, that's such a sweet idea. Let me go do that. So I just opened my door and knock on her door and I was like, do you want to go get ice cream? And we went and had ice cream and we stayed up for hours that night talking and bonding over our Oreo ice cream. And that was the start of our friendship. And we have just been best friends ever since then. But yeah, she's great. And then she encouraged me to start my YouTube channel, and and she actually even gets recognized for being on my YouTube, which cracks me up. It, like all the time, she's always texting me. She's like, Bailey, somebody recognized me from your YouTube channel.
But you're making everyone famous, Bailey. All you need to do to become a celebrity, forget Instagram and all this stuff, just appear on Bailey Guy's YouTube
Oh
channel
my
and you'll be
God.
famous. You'll be, it's so far, that's such a sweet story though. Like it started with ice cream. I mean, so basically, if your mum hadn't suggested that, you two never would have exchanged a single word. I can't believe that you had hotel rooms like opposite one another and you see each other and you literally just didn't say
So
anything?
we would just walk to and from rehearsals in silence because we were always going to the same place. But we would just like, I don't know. I think I was so intimidated by her, and she, I guess, was intimidated by me too. And so we just didn't know what to say, which, I mean, we were teens, and so the
Yeah,
insecurities can
okay.
happen. And now I feel like if I saw someone I was super intimidated by, I would almost be more inclined to talk to them because I would want to break through that and see them as a human instead of, this idea of them in my mind. And I think that was kind of what was happening. And so, yeah, we bonded over Oreo ice cream and mutually being a runner up. And so that was the start of it all.
That's a very cool story. I mean, you mentioned that, teen title holders, maybe you were slightly intimidated by one
Yeah.
another. I mean, that's a thought in and of itself. But I mean, you've been in the pageant industry for a while. Can you describe how you think you've developed from? I remember talking to you in our first interview. You said how you got into pageantry. I seem to remember you being on a stage and getting hit by lightning or something. There was a lightning, something.
Yeah.
I randomly remember that. And I have interviewed someone who was hit by lightning, by the way, just fun fact. But how have you developed as a person from, back then to the young girl you were to the young woman that you are now?
Well, I think that one of the biggest things that's changed is that I really accept failure better. And I accept that everything happens for a reason, and that ultimately, even if I lose, I still win. And I think that's a hard concept to grasp at first. And I certainly wasn't grasping that as a child when I first started competing. But over the years, I've just seen that the pageants that I lost, I learned so much. And when you really go at it from the perspective that there's no winning or losing, it's either winning or learning, that you realize that you really can't lose. Because if you're putting yourself out there and you're trying this new experience, and pageantry really I've heard it be called glam Girl Scouts. And it really is just one of those things where you're going to learn so many life skills, you're going to make friendships, and you're going to have so many opportunities that if you really immerse yourself in it and embrace it for all that it is and allow yourself to grow through it, that you're going to come out a winner on the other side of it, even if you don't have a crown, just because you went through the experience. And I think that's really where the success comes from. In it all is that growth. And so, it took me several years to learn that, but certainly as a teen, I was just figuring that out, that I don't have to win to be successful, and that I actually can take even more from an experience if I lose at times.
Give the audience watching or listening an idea as to what your prep has been like. I mean, obviously, this is not your first time, not your first rodeo. So I'm curious to know a lot of. Well, I mean, we also already joked about you being a celebrity. So
That
on a
always
more
cracks me
serious,
up.
on a, I mean,
I just can't even take it serious.
I'll have to get your autograph. But when young girls or young women watch someone such as yourself compete, they might assume that for you everything is easy because you've done it before, and so pageant prep is really, really smooth. How has your preparation been this time? Has it been super easy? Has it been super smooth? Has it been super different this time preparing for the Miss America system?
Oh, I'd have to think about that one. I think my prep for this one, Well, Miss America, I think one thing that makes it different than any other organization is that there's a lot to it. So they have emphasis on several different categories, whereas a lot of pageants will have, they'll have like the walk is really important, the interview is really important, and social media. But with Miss America, there's talent, and there's public speaking aspects. There's just a lot of categories just in the phases of competition that aren't in every other pageant, and so that's something that already makes it stand out from the crowd in that aspect. And that's definitely a challenge to be prepared for all the phases of competition and to be really well rounded. And so I think that my prep for this one, I've really focused on being that well-rounded person and being mentally and emotionally and physically and spiritually healthy in every way. And so I've really put focus on that. So of course, my prep, working out every day and practicing interview and doing my talent, but also taking my talent into other places and for audiences that aren't just my mom when I practice. I mean, usually when I'm practicing for a pageant, it's an audience of my mom. But I've taken my talent into elementary schools. I've taken it to nursing homes and really used it as an opportunity to get more involved in my community more than I ever have before. In the past. And so I think that one of the things that's been the biggest difference between now and in years past is I really have found a wholeness through this prep experience in a way that I haven't experienced before. And I've also been able to, I feel, serve people better and in a more, just in a more impactful way and in a more multifaceted way than I have in the past.
Remember when I first interviewed Presley Pedigo that she told me that Tennessee was the volunteer state.
It is
That's
volunteer.
always stuck with me and struck with me. But for people watching again, I don't want to assume they know. I know you're very famous and you're a celebrity. Just in case they,
We don't have to say all that. We do not have to say.
I just like seeing how bashful you get every time I mention it.
I
But
would never use those words to describe myself, so that's why I get a little embarrassed. But it's very flattering. I'm honored that someone said that. Um,
I'll
but
have to.
it's funny.
I'll have. I don't know if she wants me to tell you her name, but I'll have to tell you off air. You can message her. She'll probably faint. But
Yeah.
your talent. Do you want to tell people what it is, or are you not allowed to say it? I know sometimes it's
Oh, I'm
a
very open
closely
about it.
guarded secret.
Yes, I'm
Okay,
an
so
open
what's the
book
talent?
about everything. Yes, so I'm a ventriloquist and I have a puppet named Jolene. She is based off of, so her personality is kind of a Dolly Parton type personality. So she has a country accent, but she's also, her physical appearance was based off of the Dolly Parton song Jolene. And
Hmm.
so in the song Jolene, the girl is described as having ivory skin and auburn hair and green eyes. And so that is how Jolene looks, my puppet. So we wanted her to be sort of pay homage to, such a famous Tennessee woman being Dolly Parton. And to pay a tribute in that way. So I thought that was really cool to be able to honor, my Tennessee state, my root state here, by honoring another successful woman from Tennessee. But we'll be singing Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious as my talent song, and from the movie Mary Poppins. And I actually chose that song because I grew up, I've always loved Julie Andrews. She's my favorite actress of all time. I love probably my favorite movie of all time is The Sound of Music, which is another movie that she stars in. But I remember growing up, I would watch Mary Poppins, and my dad actually taught me the song Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. And I remember we were watching it one night together, and he sang the song, he sang along, and I was like, how do you know that? How do you know that word? How do you know this song? And he taught it to me, and he was like, super, cala. And we just went back and forth until I had learned it. And so I wanted to be able to also honor him in that way of kind of having a special little piece of him on stage with me where, he taught me the song. And so I'm getting to sing a song that, I have a memory attached to him with, which will be really special. But he did pass away in 2023, so about almost 2 years ago that he passed away. And so I've been trying to also throughout my prep and in every phase of competition, finding ways to honor him and to make to feel like he's with me on stage.
That is a very long word. supercalifragilisticexpial. I don't think I can recite it off the top of my head, but I watched a lot of Sound of Music growing up,
Hmm.
and that I think after you watch a movie so many times, it just sort of gets into your head. I mean, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even though the sound of it is something quite atrocious, isn't
Yeah.
that the next line? Yeah,
Hmm.
it's gonna be a fun one to perform. Let me just ask you. You mentioned you're taking Jolene and you're speaking in elementary schools, nursing homes. What has it been like doing that? Obviously, performing on stage is one thing, and it's fun, it's amazing, and you have young women looking up to you.
Yeah.
When you go into school and you are serving those people very very directly, I got to imagine that's been a pretty rewarding experience for yourself.
Yes, that truly, and I am like 100% not exaggerating when I say this, going into the elementary schools and talking about goal setting, doing my talent, and just interacting with them is truly my absolute favorite thing to do. I want to do it every single day for the rest of my life. It is so much fun. If there was a job that paid to do that, except I guess Miss Tennessee, I would do it because it is the most fun thing in the whole world for me. I even if I start out having, like a rough morning or a bad day, when I go into the elementary school, the second that I walk in, I instantly feel so uplifted. And I just stay on this cloud nine for the rest of the day because it's so uplifting and so cool to see the dreams of these children and to see them get excited about their future and to feel proud of themselves. One of the things that I teach when I go in there is I like to do my goal setting roadmap. And so I've developed a framework that goes to the acronym of goals. So the G stands for generate a vision, and then overcome obstacles, acquire life skills, lead with fruitful habits, and shine your light. And so I have big, colorful wooden letters that spell out goals that I take into the school with me. And one of the most just incredible moments is when we're going over the G, so generate a vision, and I'll ask the kids to close their eyes and to imagine their future self, and to imagine everything about it. And so it's generating a vision of who they want to be someday. So I ask them to think about what job they'll have and what they'll look like and what kind of outfit they'll wear and where they'll work. Will they be in a classroom or a courtroom or a doctor's office? Depending on their job, where will they be? And just imagine everything about this and really feel it, and then feel how they feel about themselves in that. And when they open their eyes, I ask them, how do you feel about yourself? And they say, I feel so proud of myself and I feel excited for my future. And it has brought tears to my eyes before. I mean, it kind of is like giving me misty eyes right now just thinking about it, because I see that's where, like, that is the mission of goal setting and of GPS, is to ignite that hope and that excitement for these kids' futures and the confidence that they can achieve that dream. And then following it up towards the end of my presentation by saying that this was my childhood dream. Competing for Miss Tennessee and being able to do exactly what I'm doing was my dream from being in elementary school. Pretty much, I think I might have been actually sixth grade, but as a child, that was my dream. And I always say, and I am still sticking with this dream, and I've believed in this dream, I've worked hard for this dream, and if I can do it after all these years and I've stuck with it, and I've had no's and I've had losses, but I was dedicated to this dream, then you should also be dedicated to your dreams and believe that your dreams can come true too. Because if it's coming true for me, then it can come true for you. And it's just really inspiring to be able to see just the way that their eyes just light up during that presentation and how it really does touch their hearts and their minds. And so, oh gosh, I get just giddy about it. I genuinely want to do it every single day. I love it. It's
I
so
can
much
see that.
fun.
Just so that I know, so when you say elementary school, because we don't use that term here in
Mhm.
Australia, how old or what grade is elementary school?
It's typically ages 5 to about 11 is
Right.
elementary.
Okay.
And then I've also talked to
Gotcha.
some high schools. I did a keynote speech for a big high school group that had 600 high schoolers, and so I did the same general idea of, I did the whole goal setting and we went through the acronym, but I adjusted everything to be more appropriate for high schoolers. Um, but I had the same response. So many of these high schoolers, and I mean, y'all, high schoolers are a tough crowd, okay? Tough audience to be talking there. And that's ages 14 to 18, roughly.
Yeah.
but so many of them DM'd me after and said that how that inspired them and how my stories, they related to them, and they saw themselves in my stories. And it just knowing that I'm able to touch a wide variety of age groups with this central message of goal setting and believing in your dreams and believing in yourself and taking a chance on yourself has just, it just lifts my heart so much. I love it, love it, love it. And I want to do it forever. I want to be a motivational speaker professionally. And so I would love to do that every single day of my life. Genuinely. It's the most fun thing to do.
It sounds like you really are going to be genuinely famous very, very soon. I asked you about the elementary school age because as a tennis coach, I worked a lot with teenagers, and a lot of other coaches and even school teachers sort of feared, they were kind of afraid of teaching teenagers because they found it a very difficult, as you said, a very difficult age group to work with. But I think for me, I really enjoyed that challenge. I found it very, very fulfilling. Like if you were able to make a genuine connection and they would open up, because very often teenagers is when you start having like really big problems in, like, you know, big in
Yes.
inverted commas, like you have your first crush, you have followed soon after by your first breakup, and then, you know, maybe your parents are arguing, maybe you have friends at school and then you're not friends. So I'm just curious, because you've obviously spoken to a wide range now about goal setting. Have you noticed any sort of differences in working with the different age groups? I mean, is there a particular age group that's more optimistic? I mean, are they actually optimistic? Because a lot of the time in this day and age, I feel in school, the kids aren't enjoying it. The world can be a pretty scary place, especially at the moment. It's evolving so rapidly. What's the general feeling like been for you going into school and working with those different age groups?
Well, I will say what you touched on, I totally agree that although high schoolers can sometimes be a little more resistant to your message, they are really the ones that you need to reach.
Yeah.
And so I also took that as a challenge of how can I reach this group that might not want to be reached, but that would really benefit from my message. And I am very proud that they were open to it, and that so many of them did reach out to me afterwards. And they didn't have to do that, you know. They didn't have
Yeah.
to find me on Instagram. One girl even emailed me. They didn't have to do that, and so you know. But it meant a lot to me that they did, and it knowing that the message that is the message that they need, you know, that goal setting, because that's so relevant to them. When you're in high school, that is kind of the age. Okay, well, look, I'm going in a lot of different directions, but basically back to your question, I would say one of the differences is that the younger children, they have these really big dreams, and dreaming comes really easily to them because it's very imaginative and they don't have to know all the facts, you know. And so even if they want to say that, even if they say that they want to, you know, be an astronaut or a president, that a lot of children say, and, you know, they might not end up actually doing that someday, and that's okay. And so we also focus on what are the skills and the qualities that that takes. I don't put the emphasis ever on the job itself that they want to do someday. And,
Yeah.
you know, the goal, of course, is important, but I actually spend the majority of my presentation with the children talking about what are some of the qualities that you'll have. And so if a little boy says that, or a little girl says they want to be a police officer, I say, what are some qualities that you think that you'll have as a police officer? I think you'll be very brave, you know. And so they'll kind of come up with those kinds of qualities, and they'll be really brave and strong, and they'll protect people and keep people safe. And I really emphasize that, because those are qualities that even if they don't become a police officer someday, even if they don't become president or an astronaut, the qualities of being a good leader and of, you know, protecting others, being caring, those are qualities that can transcend whatever the career that they will end up being, and that can transcend age. They can have those qualities right now and be thinking about those and being aware of those. So with the little kids, I focus a lot more on the qualities that it takes, and that the qualities they can go ahead and start thinking about. With high schoolers, in that particular case, they, you know, have a more realistic idea of what they want to be someday. And so it was really about the mindset and of how they thought about themselves. I think when you're in high school, that was something that I, at least for sure, dealt with, and kind of back to the teen mentality that, you know, there's a lot of insecurities that you have as a teenager, and sometimes you don't even believe in yourself. You don't even fully believe that you can do it. And so I wanted to really shift their mindset And so one of the things that I did in teaching them the importance of mindset and visualization, and how the way that you think about yourself
Mm.
really matters and becomes reality is, and this was actually taught to me by my biggest mentor, Dale Smith Thomas. Obsessed with her. She's a queen. She's a motivational speaker here in Tennessee, but she speaks internationally. I love her to death. But she actually taught me this, and it's that if you imagine a lemon, so imagine a lemon is in front of you, and then you take a knife. Imagine you take a knife and you slice the lemon in half, and then you pick up that half of the lemon and you put it in your mouth. And instantly, everybody will have their eyes closed when I'm telling this, but instantly you can see their faces go.
Yeah.
Their mouth waters. There's a physical reaction, and I say that's how powerful your mind is. That there was no lemon
Yeah.
in reality, but that your body reacted to it as if there was. Your mouth started watering. Your face might have cringed up. And you might have even, some people even go like, "Ugh," like, "Ooh," they'll make an audible noise. And it's your body's physical reaction to something that's totally in your mind. And so I use that as an example for the high schoolers. I have done it with elementary school, but high schoolers especially, that really
Yeah.
clicked with them that, oh my gosh, if I think poorly of myself, then those thoughts are going to become my reality. And that's how I'm going to start presenting myself and acting throughout my life. If I think good thoughts about myself and I'm confident in myself and I believe in myself, and even if I maybe don't believe, but I say nice things about myself,
Yeah.
then those things will come to fruition too. So I think that was sort of the shift, or the difference in elementary to high school is it was a lot more tangible for the high schoolers because they are on the verge of becoming whatever those goals were. And that thinking about their career and college and majors, those were all really relevant topics for them. And I wanted them to realize that the way that they think about those things and think
Yeah.
about themselves is real.
I found from working with teenagers myself that if you want to really get across to them, you needed to be able to sort of communicate on their level. They really didn't like, and maybe you were the same. I know I was the same. Someone who, because a teacher generally is older, and the teacher speaks down to them, and very often in a classroom, maybe they're teaching you something that you're really not that interested or invested in, whether it's math or arithmetic or whatever it is, history in my case. I think connecting with teenagers, what you need to do is be relatable,
Yes.
real, and not speak down. Really value when you speak to them almost like they're an adult, like you're on the same level, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just curious for yourself because we've both mentioned that working with teenagers is obviously different to working with elementary school age children, and a lot of people find it very tough, particularly adults. I think the older you get, sometimes the harder it is for you to work with teenagers. But how were you able to get through to them? Because I've got to imagine it's because you led in some way with authenticity and speaking to them at and meeting them where they're at.
Yes, one of the strategies that I took into that speech was that every single one of my stories somehow related to me being in high school. And so I wasn't going to talk about, I may have touched on my college experience, but I wasn't really talking about my adult life necessarily. I was really keeping the stories focused on my high school self and what I experienced in high school, and, the sort of challenges that I was facing in high school. I thought about that very seriously going into that speech of what message did I need when I was that age? Not what message do I need now, or what message does a little, an elementary schooler need? What message did I need when I was in high school? And that was really what I built or what I catered the talk to, was thinking about, what's going to get their attention. And so I told stories about myself and some of my friends from high school and the things that we experienced and lessons that I've learned. And I kept everything very relevant to things that they're going through and things they're experiencing. I think I talked maybe about, like the people being made fun of. That was a thing that happens a lot in high school. And I would talk about how I got, made fun of for a certain thing, or I saw a friend being made fun of or being bullied out of a certain thing that they love to do. And so those were things that were really tangible for them to be able to grasp and relate to, because if they haven't experienced it, they've definitely seen someone experience it.
Yeah.
So getting the stories and the general message very catered to them and what they're going through right now was my strategy for relating to them. And I think it worked because so many of them
Yeah.
did reach out to me and say, I totally saw myself in that story, or the same thing is happening to me right now, and I'm going to use your advice. And so I'm really glad that I took that strategy because I think that was the secret to connecting with that age.
And I think finally on that topic, I think what I love about reaching that age is they've obviously, all fingers crossed, they've got a long life to live ahead of them. So I really feel like when you can reach them and you can make an impact, which you obviously did, because I got to say, they wouldn't be messaging you if you hadn't made an impact. So you've done something great there. But if you've made a difference to them, especially with something like goal setting, and I'm sure you thought of this, you can take a one, maybe it's a 1 degree shift on the day, or 2 degrees or 5 degrees. But if you take that 1, 2, 5 degrees out, a year from now, a decade from now, 20 years from now, you could be having these people coming to you back in, 10, 20 years from now and saying, I became X, Y, Z because of that talk you did at school. I mean, have you ever thought, future thinking here, have you ever thought of what that might be like if you continue down the path that you're on and speaking about goal setting and things like that, that you might in 10, 20 years time have someone come to you and say, hey, aren't you Bailey Guy? Aren't you the person who came in and gave me that presentation about, goal setting? I just want to tell you that because of you, I became, this. Maybe I became president or an astronaut. Have you ever thought of that?
I have genuinely never thought about that before. But
Well, think about it now.
that's a really awesome, crazy thought to have. Oh my goodness. Because I've wanted to be a professional speaker since I was 13 years old. So for 10 years now, we're actually coming up on the 10-year anniversary of me discovering that. It was late July, early August when I realized it. And I know the exact date though. I have it written down somewhere. But so it's been almost 10 years since I've realized that. And I think for so long I thought of it in the future of, okay, well, someday I'll get to be a speaker and someday I'll be doing that professionally. But I am doing that now, and I'm building my business, and I've graduated from college, and so I'm putting all of my effort into building up that business and really branding myself in that way to be a speaker specifically for high school and college age students. And, I never have thought about that, but I'm sure it will happen someday because I've even seen speakers multiple times where, I'll see them once and then I see them a few years later and I'm able to have a conversation about the impact that they made on me. So if that's even happened for me, I'm sure that, from the other's perspective, I'm sure it will happen eventually. But wow, that's a really incredible, that's a really, really cool thought. I need to start daydreaming about that because that's really motivating for me. That's really exciting. That would be the biggest honor I think ever, to have somebody come up to me after a speech and say, because you said such and such, I did this. That would make my whole life, honestly. I'd be like, okay, let's all wrap it up and go home. That's the goal.
Well,
Mission accomplished.
because
So,
you've talked about, I know how into goal setting you are. I remember I asked you, I put a question about journaling up, and you sent me 3 paragraphs, 3 pages of journaling advice. So you're obviously into journaling, and then you're into public speaking. It was very detailed with the journaling. You went crazy. It was so much
I don't
information
even
there. It's like,
remember doing that, but that sounds like me because I do stuff like that. Somebody will ask a very general question on Instagram, and I'm like, let me give you all the advice that I have, and it's next thing you know, I've written a whole book, and I'm like, Bailey, why are you like this? I love giving advice though. Giving advice is one of my favorite things to do. Anytime someone comes to me for advice, I'm like, let me give you the whole rundown.
because that leads on to the question, which I wanted to sort of try to work out what the common thread is, right? Because a lot of people have different aspects to their lives. I mean, we all do. But usually there's a common driver deep within that person. So you've already identified you love goal setting, you love journaling. Now you want to be a public speaker specifically for younger children in school. What do you think is a common thread in you that really makes you want to do these things? Because I have to say, it's well known now that public speaking is a fear for a lot of people. I'm not just talking pageant girls here. A lot of people apparently are more afraid of public speaking than dying. Yet for me, I've always loved speaking. And I wouldn't even say that I'm a very extroverted person. I mean, people see me doing this and I think he must never shut up. But actually in person, I'm quite happy to be by myself with my own thoughts. But for me, public speaking was always a chance to impact someone's life with a written word. You didn't need to sell them something. You didn't need them to buy something, but you could really make a huge difference, maybe with one word, one sentence, one idea. So and I always wanted to help people, to use myself as an example. It's like, how can I make the biggest impact? And I thought, well, actually, speaking, just meeting people where they're at and speaking might be a really good way of doing that. But I'm curious for yourself, what's the common thread? Like, what has tied your journey to this point anyway? What's tied that journey together for yourself?
I think it's hope. I think having hope in my future was what has gotten me through some really hard times. And really, what even led to me having such a passion for goal setting was that when I was 8 or 9 years old, my grandmother passed away. And it really hit me hard. And I actually went through a really long depression as a child after that. And it was my goal setting and the thought of my future self and also my faith in God that got me through that. I really completely attribute my healing from that depression to God's love and faithfulness in getting me through that and his healing, and then my ability to really have hope in something and in my future. And so as a speaker and in my book and on my podcast and in everything that I do, in everything, I want to just give people hope. And if people can have hope in themselves and in their future and in their goals and in whatever it is, hope is such a powerful thing that can get you through such hard times. And even, I've seen how goal setting has changed people's lives and have gotten people through hard times over and over again. Even when my dad passed away in 2023, and it kind of felt like the exact same situation over again from losing my grandmother. They even passed away to the same thing. So it was very reminiscent. And it truly was the fact that I had goals and that I was able to rest, but also think forwardly. And that I knew, okay, even though my life feels like it's stopping right now, it feels like it's just over and done with, there is something in the future. I will move on. I not move on, but I will move forward.
Forwards.
Yes, I'll keep pushing on. And it was just hope, and I think hope has gotten me through so much. And it's something that got me, when I was in middle school and in high school, and I might have friendship issues and, so-and-so is my best friend, and then now they're campaigning against me for student council, like all the things that, that you go through that when you're young, you just feel like it's the end of the world. But when you have hope in something, you can push through. And so if anything, goal setting is one of my greatest passions, but ultimately I think that the thread that holds my whole story together is hope. And if I can spread hope to people and give people a reason to have hope in their future, that is my ultimate goal. And whether they're putting, whether it's a goal that they have or, a career goal or a life skill goal or whatever it may be, if they can just have something that they want to work towards and put their hope in and believe in and work towards and, move forward towards, that can get you out of some really tough situations, because it has for me multiple times.
Love that. I think those are two of my favorite words, hope and faith. But let me ask you this. There are people in the world, a lot of people probably right now, who are without hope. Mm-hmm. And if anyone's watching, and you've been in that place, it's a very, very dark place. It can feel very, very lonely. I think I've been in that place myself. Probably most people can relate to it. Mm-hmm. If there's someone watching this or someone listening to this and they're going through a really, really tough time, and they feel without hope, I know this is not fair to ask as a general question, but what has worked for yourself, or what general advice would you have for someone who's battling a really difficult time at the moment and is without hope?
Well, my first and foremost advice would be seek God about it, because God gives me purpose. He gives every single one of us purpose. And if I didn't have God, I would not have hope either. And so my hope, although it's in my future, it comes from God. And so God is the reason why I'm able to feel purposeful and feel fulfillment and feel hope in my future. If it wasn't for God, I would have none of those things. And peace and joy, they all come from God. And so I first and foremost would seek God and pray to God and read his word and seek that, because that is where my true happiness and joy and peace have all come from, is God, and in nothing else in the world. Like, even, my future and the, the things that I think about and that make me excited for the future, none of that matters if I didn't have God, because it's really just, I'm just wanting to seek his purpose for my life, and that ultimately my future and my hope in my future and the goals that I have are only my goals because I feel that they're in alignment with God's purpose for my life. And so ultimately everything I do is to just, I don't know the word, to pursue the purpose
Yeah.
that God has for me. So I would say to seek God. And then second, I would say to find something to put your hope into. And so if you could even say, okay, 1 year from now, I want to have done this, or to be more of this, or to work on this aspect of my life, then that's something you can immediately start working on. And you can start building that confidence back up, and having something that is a very, I've used the word tangible a lot, but it is tangible. Even if it's, I want to just start going on a walk for 20 minutes a day, that instantly lifts your mood so much. And
Yeah.
so if you can dedicate yourself to anything, that can give you a lot of hope and confidence, and you'll be able to see a result from that. No matter how small it may be, it can lead to more hope, and it can remind you, okay, today mattered because something mattered. I did something and it had a result, and it will ultimately lead to whatever it may be. But I would say seek God first and foremost.
I don't, as I think when we first interviewed, I told you that I just read the entire Bible from
Yes.
front to back, and that was an experience in and of itself, quite confronting, took quite a lot of hard work. And I will say the Old Testament and the New Testament are very different, and sometimes it's conflicting and confusing. But you make your way through it, and I'm overdue to go through it again. But talk to me just briefly about the importance of faith, because I know I was speaking, to example, for a young woman, a young friend of mine who's going through a hard time, and I was just, not as advice, but I was just talking about religion, or do you believe in God, sort of thing. And she was quite adamant that she didn't. And, I have no judgment on that, only that what we talked about is hope. And you've identified, faith as an important place to start. And I've always thought that no matter what you believe in, you have to believe in something bigger than yourself. Because I think when you're going through a hard time, that's really the only thing that can pull you through. Because if it's just you against the world and all these terrible things are happening to you, that can feel really overwhelming, right? So that's when you need to believe in something bigger than yourself to really pull you through those really difficult times. But just I'm curious, how important has faith been to you in your journey, especially through those hard times?
I think faith is the only reason that I've been able to get through any of them. And I find so much strength in my faith, and joy and peace. And I mean, even when I'm laying in bed at night and I can't go to sleep, and I just have all these thoughts on my head, and my heart feels heavy, and I just pray, and I just say, God, I'm giving this to you. Just please, just clear my mind, give me peace, give me comfort. Instantly, he does, and he's faithful to that. And God is such a interactive, I don't know if that's the right word, but he's so engaging, and he'll respond. And like, even if I have to wake up really early one morning, and so fun fact, I don't drink coffee or energy drinks. So all my energy is just coming from myself. I don't know where it comes from, but, because I don't do anything that, I'm just like no caffeine basically. And so, but if I have to get up really, really early and have a lot of energy in the morning, I will pray the night before, and I'll say, God, wake me up with a burst of energy. And sure enough, he has never failed me. Every single time I've said that prayer, I wake up, I'm jumping out of bed, I'm ready to go. And it's just like those little things where I'm like, wow, what a friend we have in Jesus and God, because he really will, like, he'll come through for you in those things. And I'll ask him to remind me of things sometimes, like if I have a meeting at, 7 p.m. or something, and I'm like, oh, I'm definitely going to forget about that. But I'll be like, God, can you remind me at like 6:45 that I have a meeting? Sure enough, he'll remind me. And so it's just, he does come through in so many ways, and gives you peace and comfort. And like, even, I've seen the impact that a life with faith versus without I've seen the difference because actually even my parents, my mom, from me being born, she was a Christian and my dad wasn't. And so he actually did not, he believed in God, but didn't have a relationship with God. That's how
Yeah.
I would probably describe it. He didn't deny God's existence, but didn't really have anything to do with God necessarily.
Mm.
And whereas me and my mom were always both very in tune with God and wanted to grow closer and strengthen our relationship. And that was a huge priority to the two of us.
Yeah.
And so, but me and my mom would always pray. My whole life we spent praying that my dad would accept God and want to grow that relationship. And I think that in the end that God ultimately did answer that prayer because my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in August of 2023 and he passed away 19 days later. So it was a very sudden passing, but although sudden, he had just enough time because exactly 2 weeks before he passed away, so about 5 days into him being diagnosed, he made the decision and he said, you know what, I really am not strong enough. I actually do need God. And he asked Jesus into his heart and asked for salvation and said when he got out of the hospital that he wanted to start going to church and he wanted to further develop that relationship. And unfortunately, he didn't get that opportunity, but I fully believe that he was saved in that moment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so even though he, only spent 2 weeks with that salvation, he that completely did change. It changed all of us to be able to see that and to moments after he passed away, my mom and I actually both had a sort of a vision of him walking in heaven. And it was just about 5 to 10 minutes after he passed away, and we were still sitting there, and he was laying there and had just passed, and we're just processing, and I said, I feel like I see him in heaven right now. And my mom
Mm.
said, I see him too. And we closed our eyes and we were just describing what we saw. And it was almost the exact same vision, just from two different perspectives of him walking in heaven. And so I fully believe that he was saved. And I think that was a very answered prayer that me and my mom had prayed for 21 years at that point. And it took 21 years, but it came true. And God answered that prayer. And so God does answer prayers and he is faithful. And you might not see it at first. And, if we had given up after that first time saying the prayer or thought, oh, well, God didn't
Yeah.
answer that prayer, so he, must not love me or listen to me. No, he listened all along. And it was in his perfect time that prayer was answered. And it happened to happen the way that it did. But although that was such a heartbreaking time in my life, I
Yeah.
saw so many blessings through it that I know were from God, and there were so many things where God was saying, I'm right here. And even though it feels like your world is falling apart, I'm with you and your world isn't falling apart. And so there were a lot of hidden blessings in such a tragic time. And that's, if I didn't have my faith, I wouldn't have been able to see those things.
I haven't, thank God, lost a parent. I did lose a younger sister, however, and similarly to yourself, maybe even more so, was very sudden. It was overnight, no warning. You don't get a chance to say goodbye or anything like that. And I think what I learned from that is everyone, I mean, you mentioned, God's timing. I think everyone in the grieving process also is very, very different. I don't know that there's any step-by-step play as to, how to get out of your grief. And I think everyone grieves differently. But I'm just curious. And you mentioned that there have been various blessings to come from it. And that's always, what you want to hear is that, some good has come from such a dark time. I'm just curious for yourself, how do you, because a lot of what we've spoken about was happening before your father's passing. I'm just curious, since then, have you learned anything more about yourself? Do you feel you've grown in maybe ways you didn't expect? I mean, you mentioned the blessings, like in terms of the blessings for yourself, what have been some of those blessings that have come from such a dark time?
I definitely have grown so much as a person because of that. And I think I grew in a lot of ways that I really needed to grow and that it was kind of past due time for me to grow in some of those ways. Just as kind of like a little bit of background, I did grow up an only child. And so I my parents just naturally, I was an only child, okay. and,
Got it.
and so, for example, my dad would he would fill up my gas every time that my gas was low. I straight up did not even know how to use a gas station up until he passed away, which I'm embarrassed to admit. But and he would cook dinner for the family, and so after. And my mom too, though she didn't know how to fill up gas either. She didn't even know what side of what side of her car the gas tank was on. I kid you not. And so because my dad he was just so great, he filled up
Yeah.
our gas for us every week or so, and he would cook our dinner every night. And so me and my mom, after he passed, of course, people were bringing meals for probably a good month. We were set with the kindness of other people, but then it gets to a point, and we just kind of were like, what do we do now? we have
Yeah.
to we have to learn. We have to grow, and we have to figure this out on our own. And we went to the gas station together, and we're like, let's figure out how to pump gas, because we had never done that. And we learned how to cook, and so I've learned how to cook a lot of meals now. And I think one of the biggest things I've gained is so much independence,
Yeah.
and knowing that I can do things on my own. And that was something that I am very embarrassed, honestly, to admit that it took so long. That I was 21 when I really started adulting. But that was, although the absolute worst thing that ever happened to me,
Yeah.
losing him. But I did need to grow a bit, and I needed to learn. And I can say that with the self-reflection of the past 2 years, where I now do cook my meals, and I fill up my own gas tank, and I do a lot of the things, and I get my oil changed and get my car fixed, and all the things that he used to you know
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
help me with. I do them on my own, and I have a lot of independence now that I didn't have back then. And I also
Yeah.
feel that I have a lot more compassion now, that I've gained from that. And I'm able to understand people going through a really tough time better now,
Mm.
having gone through my own tough time. And so even when I feel like it's given me an avenue to connect with people better. And so even when I'll go into elementary schools, oftentimes if I can pick up on the vibe that the children have, if there's a sadness in the room,
Yeah.
or sometimes you can just feel an energy,
Yeah.
and I'll oftentimes bring up that story of losing my dad, and I'll mention how I'm now in a single parent household. And if I feel that it's appropriate to bring that up, and instantly every single time that I have done that and felt led to say that, these little eyes will just, they just get so wide, and they automatically, there's this connection that I feel with these children, because they see that, oh my gosh, this girl who, has this crown and this pretty dress, and her hair looks, is curled, and she has makeup on, and, she looks this certain way, but she's gone through this really hard time that maybe they've gone through or have had a similar experience, or maybe it's just them and their mom, or just them and their dad, or whoever it may be at home. And they're able to relate to me.
Yeah.
And so I feel that one of the biggest blessings is my ability to now connect with people and have compassion for really tough situations, and come at it from an understanding that I didn't have before he passed away. And I really say that I completely acknowledge the privilege that I had, in being in a family where I was an only child to two parents that were so in love with each other. And I realized how rare that is, and how I was always very thankful for it. But after you lose it,
Yeah. Yeah.
you become more aware of
Yeah.
how incredible that was to experience. And so now, not having it anymore, I've learned a lot, and I've grown a lot, and I'm able to understand people and connect with people. And I think that's been one of the biggest blessings, is my I have more of an awareness of problems that other people face, and a way of connecting with them, and understanding and having compassion for things that I couldn't grasp before that.
Yeah. I think that's one of the greatest gifts for a speaker is, and I don't know if you agree with this, but for me, speaking is not about going there to just say a speech. For
Hmm.
me, speaking is an ability, as we've already talked about, to make an impact.
Hmm.
And that sounds quite cold and hard in some ways, but it's when you make those moments of connection, like what you just said, and you can see maybe a pain that someone has, and it's not,
Yeah.
they haven't said anything. It's just something in their affect, the way they change when you say something, and you can lean into that. But I do think one of the gifts from pain and dark time is the ability to emphasize and just intuitively sense things. I've done that many, many times. You just sense something is off,
Yeah.
and you can be respectful about it, but you can lean into it, and you can just be there for that person in a way that I don't think you can. It's like you can't describe a sunset to someone who doesn't have the gift of vision, for example. There's just something different about it. And your dad, I mean, you acknowledged your privilege. I think what I'm looking at is when you mentioned those stories is what an amazing man he was. That his daughter never had to fill up gas. You're not the only person who's told me that before. I had a friend before, and she was older than you, and I was driving. We were driving around, and I'm a pretty spontaneous kind of guy, and I said, "Oh, you, Rach, you go and fill up the car with gas." And she didn't know how. She said, I don't know how. I don't know how. It's like,
Yeah.
you'll figure it out. It's over there. Just go do it. And she's a very intelligent person. I think it was one of the most traumatizing experiences of her life. But if we can, you said that you and your mum went to get gas. Can you remember
Yes.
like the actual story? Like what
Yes.
happened? So you get in the car. Maybe it's
Mm.
empty. I don't know. You
It
had to
was,
push it down.
yeah, so it was probably 2 weeks after he passed away, I would say, because we were really not driving anywhere for a while. But eventually, you got to put gas in your car, and so we decided to do it together because neither of us knew how. And so we went to the gas station, and she didn't realize what side of the car it was in her car. We didn't know what side her tank was on, and so
Yeah.
we drove up to one. We got out, and we realized that it was not on that side, and so we were like, "Oh no!" So we got in our car, and I don't know why. This was like it was. This could have been in a movie. Okay, just one of these scenes where like two like Dumb and Dumber happening. We literally just made a circle, went up to the same the same gas pump, and just like couldn't figure it out. And I was like, I think we need to somehow like drive the other direction because if we keep going up on the same side, it's still not going to be there. And so I'm so embarrassed to tell that story, but yeah, so we we pulled around to the other side, and we were like, okay, so now we have that. What's the order of things? When do we put the card in? When do we pick up the pump? What are all these numbers about? Like, what do we do? And so but we figured it out. And so we did it in her car first, and we also didn't realize that on the gas tank there is an arrow that says which side it's on. Yeah, we learned that. We figured that one out. It did take a minute though. And so, but yeah, we learned how to do it. We learned how to cook. And so I actually ended up taking a cooking class shortly after he passed away so that I could learn how to cook some meals. And so now we kind of share that responsibility that he totally had covered at one point. And we shared the grocery shopping, and so that was something that he also did. Gosh, I had the best dad. He did so much for us. He was amazing.
Yeah.
He really was. But we've learned all of those things, and we're able to really to grow as people and to understand. But I love what you said about how you can feel it in someone, and you can feel the change when you bring something up, because that is totally 100% what I was kind of alluding to earlier with you can just see it in the kids' eyes, because you can. The second that I mentioned that I've lost my dad, you can
Yeah.
instantly see it in their
Yeah.
eyes if they relate to that and they understand the feeling, and I'm able to just look right in their eyes and be able to connect with them and share about how they're stronger. They have this strength, and they can keep pushing forward, and just give them that hope and encouragement that if I was a child facing that situation, something that would have really meant a lot to me to hear. And just telling them that they're loved too, and that they have a purpose. That's one thing that I always like to finish out every speech, whether I felt the energy in the room or not. I always finish out my presentation by saying, if you haven't heard it ever or in a while, you are so loved, and you have a purpose, and your life is something so beautiful and so valuable, and you're worth more than any gold in the world, any diamond, anything. You are worth more than that, and you have such a purpose in life. And I like to finish out every speech just in case they haven't heard that before, with that message. But it particularly you can see that it touches the children who are the same ones whose eyes widened when I talk about my dad.
If there ever is a movie about your life, like a biography, an autobiography, the opening scene, that gas scene has to be. I just have this image in my mind of, mum and daughter going through the same gas station 10 times, going around and around. No, has it fixed it yet? No. Has it fixed it yet? No. Has it?
And she's so smart too. But I mean, my mother, she's incredible. She's so smart, and she, um, she can do anything in the world. But that was just one of those moments where we were doing something for the first time. And I mean, I'm sure she had probably filled up gas before she had met my dad, but they'd been married for about 25 years, and were dating for years before that. So it had been a few decades since she'd had to fill up her gas tank. So I guess she just, we had to figure it out together.
As long as you got there in the end. In terms of the pageant that's coming up, I think you said in 3 weeks.
Yes.
If you are fortunate enough to have that crown placed on your head, and then, even looking forwards, if we dare, to having an even bigger crown placed on your head at some point, and I'm sure you have, it's a silly question almost, but what are your plans with it?
I think one of the biggest things is spreading goal setting. And so, like I said, my biggest dream would be to just speak to as many children as possible and be in elementary schools every single day. And the thought of getting to do that for the next year, I mean, it just makes me so excited. Like the fact that that could happen, because that has been my absolute favorite thing about being Miss Music Row and even Miss Capital City before that, of the past 2 years in the Miss America opportunity, is the school visits and getting to go and share that message and getting to look in their little eyes and getting to say, a word of encouragement that they need. It's so fulfilling for me. And if I were to become Miss Tennessee, and the winner will be crowned in 3 weeks from today, which is kind of crazy. But honestly, whether it's me or whether it isn't, I'm going to continue that because I love it so much. And but if I were to be Miss Tennessee, I would be able to reach a lot more people, because that is such a fundamental part of the job of Miss Tennessee, is speaking kids. So speaking every single day would be my goal, and to just touch as many lives as possible and spread that message. That's what I want to do, whether I win Miss Tennessee or not. That's how I hope to spend the next year.
If someone is watching this and going, wow, I'd really like to have this ball of energy come and speak, is it BaileyGuySpeaks.com? Is that the best way to reach out to you?
I mean, yes. Anyway, there is a contact form on BaileyGuySpeaks.com, but even if you reach out to my Instagram at BaileyGGuy, I would say those two are probably the easiest ways to reach me.
Can I
I would
just
love
ask
to
before
speak
we?
though. Anywhere that anyone wants me to speak, yes. The answer is yes. You got me. Because I love to speak. That is genuinely my favorite thing. And I want to speak anywhere and everywhere and to any audience, any age. I've spoken to elementary, high school, and I've even spoken to women that were 2 times my age. And I've been able to connect with all of those audiences. So any kind of audience, if they need some goals and need some hope and need some encouragement, I'm there.
It's a rare gift. I think you have found your lane to swim in, by the sounds of it, and that's something to be very grateful for. Can I just ask before we move towards a close, because I've had you on already, I'm taking up an hour of your time, but when after you give a speech, and let's say it's gone really well and you've given your heart, what do you feel like immediately afterwards? Because I sometimes feel like when I do these interviews, and if it's been a deep, wide-ranging interview, and we've connected well, I sometimes feel like I need to go and lie down for a second just to recover. It's weird because I'll say it like I'm tired, like I'm exhausted, not physically, obviously, but mentally and emotionally, because you really feel you've given it your all. Do you
Yeah.
feel anything similar to that when you speak? Like you could get home or whatever and you're like, I just need to lie down for a bit.
So it's funny. My mind wants to rest and lay down, and is like, no questions. I can't like after
Yeah,
I've
exactly.
after I've answered the questions, because I always do a little Q&A at the end. So anyone who wants to come up to me and ask a question or give me a hug or a high five or take a picture, I 100% I do all the things. But then as soon as I get in my car, I'm like, okay, no music. Let's process. That's how my mind reacts, but my body
Yeah.
is like, let's go run a lap. Like I want to run a mile right now because it it hypes me up. And I do that after my podcast. Like whenever I'll record a podcast, as soon as I finish, I straight up I'll just start running laps around my house because I just have so much energy in me. It's insane. But if you tried to like ask me for like to solve a math problem or something, I'd be like, whoa,
Brain power zero.
yeah, I'd say brain power 0, energy level 100, which is a funny combination. So, because it's so emotionally, it takes a lot of mental exertion to give a speech, especially if it's an hour long. But yeah, my body wants to go run some laps afterwards because it gives me so much energy and it hypes me up and it's exhilarating. And I like to kind of equate it to being on a roller coaster. How people feel when they're on a roller coaster, it's like, whew, like that was a lot, but also that was so cool. And so that's how it feels. It's tiring in a way, but it's very energizing in another way.
So just to clarify, if anyone sees Bailey Guy out and about running laps around her house,
No, I
it's
just
because
gave a speech.
she's just given a speech, and make sure not to ask her any hard questions because there'll be no brain power.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
good to know. No. All right. Just before we move to the final 10 questions, is there anyone that you'd like to just say thanks to or give a shout out to, apart Victoria, again, whose birthday it is? Happy birthday, Victoria. But anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to for supporting you along this journey?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I would say Dale Smith Thomas is one of the biggest ones. I mentioned her earlier, she's my mentor, but she is actually the reason that I wanted to become a speaker someday. She was the first speaker that I ever met when I was 13. And I was sitting in the audience and I heard her speak and I started crying because it touched me so deeply. And I knew in that moment, I said, I don't know what this job is that she's up here doing, but that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to be there someday. And that was 10 years ago. And I went up to her after her speech. I said, I want to do exactly what you're doing someday. This is what I want to be. And she has just really taken me under her wing and showed me the ropes and encouraged me. And only 30% of professional speakers are women. And so to see her be so successful at it and just be such an inspiration. She's the best speaker I've ever heard in my life. I don't say that, lightly. She really is incredible. I still cry every time I hear her speak, even though I probably have her whole speech memorized at this point. But she really is, she's my inspiration and she's my mentor. And I would 100% have to give her a shout out any chance I get, because I wouldn't know so clearly what this path is for me if it wasn't
Yeah.
for her.
Yeah. Someone who's walked the path in front of you. That always
Yeah.
helps. Okay, Bailey, final 10 questions. Let's have a bit of fun. We can treat it like an on-stage Q&A.
Yes,
So,
I'm excited for this because I remember doing this last time and I intentionally did not listen to our interview from last time because I wanted to see if my answers change. I don't know if you'll use exactly the same questions, but I was like,
I
I want
will.
to.
You can do an exact comparison.
Okay, I was like, I don't want to know what any of my answers were because I think it's been about 3 years, so I want to see if any of them change.
I can't believe it's been 3 years. Wow.
Might have
Whenever
been,
I ask these
yeah, it's
questions,
been
because
two
I've
or three
asked them,
years. 2 or 3.
I can't believe that. It's like I was interviewing Savannah Miles, and the first time I interviewed her, she was Miss Georgia Teen USA. She was only 17 or 18, and now she said, "Oh, I'm turning 24, turning 25," and your brain kind of goes, "That can't be right. You're only 17 or 18," but then you realize actually 6 years have passed. So, but no, they're being the exact same questions, so you can. And I don't remember any of your answers. I think so. I won't know, but we can both find
There's
out
only
together.
one that I do remember. I remember you asked me, what's a job I could never do? And I said firefighter. That's the only one that I remember off the top of my head, though.
Well, I'm going to ask that same question, but let's go in order. Let's not get
Yeah.
ahead of ourselves.
Okay, I'm
All
not
right.
going to think about it because I want to see what just comes to me naturally.
Yeah. Here we go. So, number one, what is your favorite word?
Oh, my favorite word. Well, I say the word goal setting a whole lot. And it always makes me smile and makes me happy every time I get to talk about it. So I'd say anytime I can talk about goal setting, that's my favorite thing to talk about.
What is your least favorite word?
Any bad word. I think this might have been my answer last time, but I don't say bad words, and so any bad word, I just feel like they're unnecessary. I wish we could just cancel them from society.
Number three, in life, what gets you excited or what turns you on?
I would say thinking about the possibilities is something that always excites me because we're only given one life, but we really can make it anything that we want to make it. And so knowing that I can be a professional speaker or I could be a broadcast journalist or I could be, whatever it is, an author, whatever, that I have the ability to actually pursue the goals that I have and I have free will. I think that that's so exciting. Just the possibilities and the way that it's so endless and it's so open ended and, life is such a blank page that you can just throw as much color onto. I think that's really exciting.
What about what turns you off?
Gosh. I would say that's a really tough one. I feel like I'm really good at, just taking things as they come. Um, Gosh, this is a tough one. I wonder what my younger self said. Because I know I answered it then. Let's see. Probably, I would say anytime that this is one, something that really can like shut my brain off is if okay, I'm an overachiever. That might have been obvious throughout this, but sometimes I really overestimate the amount that I can get done in a day. And so I'll have this huge to-do list. It'll be like 15 things. And I'm like, okay, Bailey, I don't know if that's really possible. But sometimes it can be discouraging to not, to like write something on your to-do list and then not get to it. And I'm like, okay, let's be more realistic. I've been really trying to be more realistic with my goals for each day and my to-do list and things like that. But yeah, I would say that's something that always can get me down is if I see that my to-do list, I only checked off maybe 3 things of the 15 that I set out to do, but it's okay. They just get put to the next day.
Actually, on a side note, find it really triggering when anyone tells me to be realistic. I know it's a good thing to be, but when it's like when someone tells you to be realistic, it's almost like, well, think smaller. And
Yeah.
I find it very triggering, but
Yeah. I
that's
get
just
that.
me.
Sometimes I
I
think a little, I think big, but I'm like, okay, I love the energy, love the enthusiasm there. But
let's bring it down,
let's
chunk it
remember
down.
how many hours we have in a day.
58. Number five, what sound or noise do you love?
Probably the sound of early 2000s music because I was a 2002 baby and so I grew up hearing it on the radio and like even I would say into the 2010s that was my childhood. Anything that just a sound that just takes you back to being in the backseat of the car on the way to school in your little car seat. I think that always it just like makes you feel comfort and nostalgic for a special time in your life.
Remember what the music back then was like. Wasn't that like was that the Britney Spears and boy
Yeah,
band
Britney
era?
Spears is one of them. I was kind of just like slightly too young to like really be in the
Right.
full Britney Spears mode. That's why I kind of was like, and I guess like 2010s is actually probably a more accurate time. But any of that music from like late 2000s, early
Yeah.
2010s, that's like peak childhood for me. So, yeah.
Peak child. Peak child. Don't think that's a phrase I've heard before. Peak childhood years. Number six, what sound or noise do you hate?
Any kind of like scratching noise, like that noise that noise I just now made. Anything that sounds like that. I don't like
I
those
think
kind of.
you've made a few sound effects throughout this interview. Maybe you can be a voice actress as well. You've got the whole the sound thing going on.
I'm a sound effect person. I always add sound effects into my stories. Yeah.
Number seven, if you could have any one superpower, what would you pick and why?
Ooh, probably time travel, if that's a superpower. Getting to go to different times throughout history, I think would just be so cool. Like, the first thing I think of is like I mean, this is a terrible example, but it was the first one that I thought of. Going and like seeing the Titanic, for example, like it's crazy. Why did I say that? But I mean, really, I would have loved to have just, like been on a little time travel machine, been able to see the Titanic and just, experience that firsthand. I've always been a huge Titanic fan. I love learning about Titanic. But then obviously, surviving. But
Yeah.
that would be important. But I would just, yeah, I would love that. I also recently went to DC a few weeks ago and getting to see the history of DC and how the buildings were built and the history. And I would have loved to have watched, the former presidents that we learn about in the history books that are just walking through these monuments and the buildings and the rooms that I walked into. It just, oh gosh, I would have loved to have been able to see that.
Maybe the Titanic, but yeah, maybe escape is also important. Pick your time carefully. Let's just
Yeah.
say that.
Maybe early American history might have been a better one, although I would have wanted to survive that too, because that was also not, yeah, there's also some dangerous times there too.
Number 8, what job would you most like to attempt?
Well, obviously, I would love to be a speaker and just speaking as much as I can. I want to continue writing books, so I'm going to add author actually as the job that I would like to. I guess of jobs that I would like to attempt that I am not currently,
Yeah.
pursuing. I did write a book, Goals in Action, but I would love to. It was self-published. I would love to go the traditional publishing route and have a book deal at some
Mm.
point and write a book that's in Barnes and Noble or something. That would be so cool. I would love that. That would be dream come true for me to someday write a traditionally published book.
Number 9, I think this is the one that you remembered. What job would you definitely not like to attempt?
Yes, I remember saying firefighter. Let me see if I have a different answer now. Gosh. I don't know if I could ever. This is kind of in the same lane. I don't think I could be a police officer either.
Why?
I just that would be such a scary job. I,
Yeah.
um, I can just imagine. I mean, anytime that I have been pulled over, I have been pulled over for speeding before. I've never gotten a ticket. Never gotten a ticket, fun fact, but I have been pulled over for speeding. And I mean, my heart is just like the whole time that I'm waiting for the police officer to walk up to my window. I'm just like, and I start praying. And I just start like thinking about like, oh my gosh, like what, I just, it scares me. Anytime that happens, I'm such a rule follower. Like anytime that I feel like I let someone down or like, broke a rule or something, I do not break rules. I don't do it. Like I am a rule follower. And so, but I can just imagine the fear that police officers must have walking up to windows too. I mean, think about it. If I was a police officer and was pulling somebody over, thought that somebody might potentially be dangerous or that there may be a situation, who's a police officer going to call? Like I get to call 911. I get to call a police officer, but who are they going to call? Because they're the ones who actually have to put on the brave face and face the problem. So I don't think I could be a police officer either. I don't think I'm cut out for that one. Going up to those, random people's windows and,
Yeah.
being like, how do you know how fast you were driving? I don't even want, no, take me out of that job. I can do that
You
because I think
you you look
as scared as I was getting pulled over, I think I would be even scareder pulling people over.
you look genuinely terrified. Like you look like you're reliving the moment that you got pulled over. You look like you're having some sort of anxiety. So maybe it's best. I think we've made the point. I think maybe it's best we move on before, have some sort of episode right there.
I don't know if I could be a first responder, I guess.
Well, I
Police
mean,
officers and firefighters, those are some brave, courageous people, and I admire it, and I could never do
yeah.
it.
No, it's weird the way different people react very differently to stress and crises. Some people, and I know this because I had to do first aid training as a tennis coach, and there are some people who, when something really bad is happening, like someone just keels over, some people scream and they just freak out. Some people freeze, literally can't move, and then there are some people who get really weirdly calm and I'm one of those people. Like time slows down. Having said that, there's no way I would want to be a police officer either. Not in America, because in America, there's a lot more guns. In Australia, it's very difficult to have a gun. So that knocking on someone's window, it's like, oh, no, I'd leave well enough alone. So I take your point, but
Yeah. I'm kind of the same way. I actually pass out at the sight of blood. And so I guess I could add nurse to that and doctor. I could never be a nurse or a doctor because I don't do blood. But one time I was babysitting and the child that I was watching just nose erupted in blood, nosebleed everywhere. And I was like, okay, Bailey, you got to stay conscious right now. You cannot pass out. And I and I was able to pull through. I pulled through and I was like, okay, I'm going to Google what to do when you have a nosebleed. And I Googled it and we handled the situation. He stopped bleeding. It was all good. But so I do have the ability to, rise to the occasion in an emergency and to stay calm, which I was proud of myself because anytime that I'm bleeding, I'm going to be passing out on the floor because I can't even look at my own blood without passing out. So it's, yeah.
Hang on. I'm really confused here. So, okay, so yes, it's not good that if you're looking after a young child and they start bleeding, that the parent comes home and you've passed out next to the child who's lying in a pool of their own blood. That's okay. Let's leave that. But like, you pass out the side of your own blood. So like, what happened? Like when you're learning to cook or something, like if you cut yourself, well, you're just going to pass out on the
I have
kitchen
to look
floor.
away. I have to look away. I one time was shaving my legs. This is so TMI, but I was shaving my legs and cut myself on my leg, and I literally passed out in the shower because I saw the blood. Yeah, so I don't do blood. I've passed out at the sight of blood so many times, and it's mostly my blood. So, but yeah, like some people they'll like throw up when they see somebody else throw up. It's like kind of that reaction. Like if I see myself bleeding, I'm
Right.
like I cannot. I will pass out.
Okay.
I passed out
Yeah.
also in gym class because I saw blood and in biology class because I saw blood in high school. So my blood, other people's blood, I'm on the floor. But unless I'm 100% responsible for taking care of a child and they're bleeding, I can handle that apparently. That was when I pull through.
I feel like again in the movie of your life, I think this would have to be a part of the movie is when you're babysitting someone and you pass out next to the child who's bleeding because you saw blood. I think this
Yeah.
I think this would make an excellent movie. Anyway, let's final question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at those pearly gates?
I would love, as soon as I get to heaven, for the first thing to be, do you want to see your dad? Because at that point, hopefully, it will have been a really long time. It's been a
Yeah.
year and a half now, and hopefully, it will have been decades. But I'm sure that my dad probably misses me as much as I miss him, and I would love to see my dad as soon as I get to heaven. I think he'll definitely be one of the first people that I see. Depending on whether or not my mom has passed away at that time, my mom and my dad will definitely be the two that I see, and I can't wait to just hug him again and to experience his presence again. I feel like he has. I've sensed his presence just a couple of times since he passed away, and it's so just peaceful. Every time that I all of a sudden will feel his presence, and I wonder, like, is he checking in? But I would love for the first thing when I get to heaven, just be able to just hug my dad and to just like feel his arms around me and feel his strength again. That would definitely be what I hope happens, and I believe it will happen.
Sometimes it's when you think of the people who've passed away. Sometimes it's like, oh, I want to go to heaven now and see them, but it doesn't really work like
I,
that, does it?
this is kind of crazy. Something really crazy that happened after he passed away. This is so side tangent, but honestly, I've always been kind of afraid of like death. Like that was always a really scary thing to me. And after he passed away, I had the thought of, obviously, like I want to live a long life. I want to be, in my 80s or 90s or whatever when that time comes. But it made death less scary to me
Yeah.
because I saw my dad go through it and knowing, okay, he's gone through it. And, whenever that time comes, I don't think I'll be scared because I'll know that my parents are there, at least my dad. And so I don't think that it'll be as scary. It's interesting how your idea of death really changes. I no longer fear it the way that I used
Yeah.
to. Not that I'm inviting it, but I don't I don't fear it how I did.
It's funny. Someone I just interviewed recently said, I think it was her grandfather who had passed a while ago, and he had a saying that he lived by. He said, "I'm just going to live until I die." And I thought, that's a great way of looking at it. Just take every day as it comes, because nothing is
Yeah.
promised. But just I'm going to live every day until I die. But
Yeah.
well, Bailey, thank you so much for your valuable time as world's leading celebrity. It's been fun catching up for the second time. And best of luck in 3 weeks.
Thank you so much. This was oh my gosh, I'm just so grateful to you for having me on again. As soon as I got the DM to inviting me on again, I was like, yes, I thought you'd never ask. Because I loved being on the first time. This actually was one of the inspirations behind my own podcast, being Define Success. I think being on this podcast 2 or 3 years ago was my first time ever being on someone else's podcast before, and so that was my very very first podcast experience, and I loved it. And I although it took a while before I had the idea for my own, I think it planted the seed that I wanted to do something like that, and so it's very full circle now that I now have
It
my own
is.
podcast, and you've been a guest on my podcast, and here I am again on yours. And yours is so incredible. I hope that mine becomes what yours is someday, because yours is so, you've just captured such magic on yours. So I'm really grateful to be back on it.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. I just want to ask before we close, can you remember when you had me on? And before you hit the record button for the first time, you had one of the worst giggling, laughing fits I've ever seen. And you just couldn't hit the record button. You were laughing, you were giggling, you were hyperventilating, and you were like, okay, we're just going to do it. 3, 2, 1. And then you hit the button, then you started giggling again. Do you remember that? Because it's
I
very
do
clear in my
remember
mind.
that. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I think you might have been the very first
I
podcast
was.
that I filmed. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you were. And so I had never done that before.
Oh,
I had never filmed, been on your side before. And so yeah, we got on there and I was like, I don't know what to say. And I realized how scary that was. And but it's like one of those things, you just got to do it, and then you're good. So I have not had that experience since that time. I've been much more professional since then, but I do remember that. I was like, okay, I'm going to hit start. And then I'd be like,
yeah.
no, I'm scared. And then I was like, okay, I can do it. I can do it. No, 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 no. And it took me, we probably spent 10 minutes.
It was about 10, 15 minutes,
Yeah,
but
going
it
back and
was
forth
fun.
of you being like, you're good. Like, you can do it.
Oh my God, she's crazy. What have I agreed to? But, it's all good. It all worked out in the end. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely been full circle. So we'll leave it there. Thanks to everyone for watching or listening. If you want to reach out to Bailey, you got her social media as well as her website, Bailey Guy Speaks. If you want to book her for speaking, you can see she's very keen to take any chance she can to speak. So I'm
Yeah.
sure she'll be happy to help you guys out. But thanks for watching, guys, and we will speak to you next time.